Welcome back to the Chip Market, your home for investor-grade analysis on everything semiconductors and AI. Today, we are diving into a deal that is absolutely reshaping the future of AI hardware. OpenAI's massive partnership with Broadcom to build a custom silicon empire. Look, this isn't just some big chip order. This is a tectonic shift in the AI supply chain. So let's get into what this really means for the industry and, of course, for your portfolio.
Okay, let's just start with the headline number, because it's just insane. 10 gigawatts. That is the target. That's the scale of the compute and power footprint that OpenAI and Broadcom are aiming for. Just let that sink in for a moment. 10 gigawatts.
So what on earth does 10 gigawatts of AI capacity even mean? Well, it's not a single product. It's the grand total power draw of an entire future fleet of custom hardware. To put that into perspective for you, you're talking about the same energy output as 10 huge nuclear power plants. Or, get this, about 5% of the entire US data center industry's power usage back in 2022. This is not about running ChatGPT 4. This is about building the foundation for whatever comes next, maybe even AGI. So here's how we're going to break this down today. First, we'll unpack the deal itself, the game changer. Then we'll see why this is such a monster win for Broadcom. We'll zoom out and look at the bigger picture of compute diversification, trace the shockwaves rippling through the supply chain, and wrap it all up with a clear, actionable playbook for investors. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this deal. On the surface, yeah, it's a huge order. But when you start peeling back the layers, you realize this is a deep, strategic partnership that is way more complicated than just writing a check. Now, it's really important to get clear on what this deal is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't. This is a multi-year co-development project. OpenAI is actually designing its own custom chip, an ASIC, which stands for Application-Specific Integrated Circuit. It's purpose-built for their AI models. Broadcom's job is to take that blueprint and build a whole system around it, all connected with standard Ethernet. And here's the key. This is not a product you can buy off the shelf tomorrow. It's not a simple PO, and it's not an equity deal. It is a deep, long-term engineering collaboration. And speaking of long-term, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The chip design itself isn't even expected to be finalized or taped out until the middle of 2025. We probably won't see the very first pilot systems up and running until the back half of 2026. From there, it's a slow and steady ramp-up all the way through 2029. So the big takeaway here is that the market impact is coming, for sure, but it's going to unfold over the next 5 years. Okay, so let's flip the coin and look at this from Broadcom's perspective. For them, this deal is way more than just another win. It's a monumental victory. It aligns perfectly with their entire company strategy and really cements their role as a kingmaker in the world of custom AI.
And the price tag? We're talking north of $10 billion. That's based on the chatter from Broadcom's own earnings calls. This single deal represents a brand new, multi-year growth engine for the entire company. It's just massive.
But this is so much more than just the money. It's a perfect showcase of Broadcom's entire value proposition. It's not just about one chip. It's about their whole portfolio. The Ethernet switches, the PCIe connectivity, the optics, all of it, integrated together. And this is huge. It validates standard Ethernet as a real competitor to NVIDIA's very expensive, very proprietary InfiniBand networking. That could drive down costs and open up the ecosystem for everybody. Now, let's pull back the camera. This Broadcom deal, it's not happening in a vacuum. It is one critical piece of a brilliant three-pronged strategy OpenAI is using to lock down its future compute needs and make sure it's never, ever dependent on just one supplier. This table right here, this is the key to understanding the entire new AI landscape. OpenAI is playing chess, not checkers. Look at this. With NVIDIA, they lock down the proven, undisputed leader. With AMD, they get a legitimate GPU alternative, and they sweeten the deal with stock warrants to make sure AMD is all in. And then with Broadcom, they take their moonshot, a totally custom chip that could radically change the cost of doing AI. It is a masterclass in strategic diversification. And this strategy really just reflects where the whole market is headed. I mean, sure, general-purpose GPUs from companies like NVIDIA are still going to be the biggest slice of the pie for a while, but these custom chips, these XPUs as they're sometimes called, they're projected to grab a whopping 30% of all AI chip spending by 2030. OpenAI isn't just following a trend here, they are hitting the accelerator. A deal this big doesn't just happen quietly. It sends shockwaves, a tsunami really, through the entire semiconductor supply chain. Let's trace those ripples.
Think of it like a cascade, a set of dominoes. It all starts with OpenAI's massive need for compute. That forces Broadcom to go out and order millions of chips. That, in turn, puts a massive order in at TSMC for their most advanced wafers. But you can't build those wafers without a fire hose of high bandwidth memory and advanced packaging. And finally, you have to plug it all in, which requires a gargantuan investment in power and cooling.
And if you want proof that the supply chain is scrambling to keep up, just look at this chart. This shows the growth in TSMC's CoWoS packaging capacity. That's the supercritical tech needed to stitch these complex AI chips together. It's on track to quadruple in just 2 years. Folks, that's not just growth. That is a wartime-level expansion to try and meet this insatiable demand for AI.
Okay, so we've talked about the deal, the strategy, the supply chain shockwaves, but what does all of this mean for us, for investors? How do we navigate this brand new landscape? Let's get into the playbook. All right, let's kick it off with Broadcom. If you're an investor, or even just watching from the sidelines, this news is obviously a huge deal, but the story's really just getting started. So what are the key signposts you need to be watching for? Here's your checklist. First, keep an eye out for that term sheet to become a final signed contract. That's step one. Then, you're going to want to look for the first revenue from this deal to actually show up on the books, probably in fiscal 2026. Pay really close attention to what they say about gross margins. And finally, the big one. Watch for any new custom silicon wins. That'll tell you if this is a one-off or a repeatable, high-growth business model. Okay, now what about AMD? OpenAI placing a bet on them as a real second source for GPUs is a massive vote of confidence. But now, the pressure is on to actually deliver. For AMD investors, it really comes down to one word: execution. How good is their next-gen MI4050 GPU going to be? Are they hitting the deployment targets they need for OpenAI's warrants to kick in? Watch that data center revenue line like a hawk for clear growth from AI. A big win here could be the validation they need to land other big customers. It could create a really powerful snowball effect. And of course, the elephant in the room, the trillion-dollar question. What does all of this mean for the undisputed king of AI hardware, NVIDIA? If you're an NVIDIA investor, the game is now about watching for any change in the weather. Will that unbelievable data center growth and those sky-high margins start to level off after 2025? How are they going to respond? Will they offer their own custom chips? Will they adjust pricing? And definitely keep an eye on their own deal with OpenAI and on the growth of their software moat, CUDA, which could be their ultimate defense as the hardware competition heats up. So looking ahead, you're going to want to mark your calendars because the next 18 months are going to be absolutely packed with catalysts. We'll be listening to earnings calls late next year for those final contract details. By mid-2026, we should see the next generation of GPUs from both AMD and NVIDIA. And by the end of 2026, that's when the rubber really hits the road, with the first pilot systems from all 3 of OpenAI's partners starting to come online. So when you boil it all down, the single biggest takeaway is this. OpenAI's strategy is not a blip. It is a permanent, structural shift in how AI compute is bought and built. We are watching the AI hardware world move from a monopoly to a multipolar system in real time. The question isn't if NVIDIA's dominance will be challenged anymore. The question is how the entire ecosystem is going to evolve now that the race is truly and finally on. Thanks for watching The Chip Market. If you got value from this breakdown, do us a favor and hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see it. Invest smarter in the world of chips.